texted Diane today. She's like, I'm teasing you. I'm like, I'm stable today. Tease away. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring, but today I'm good.
No, but my ex got
All right. Are these on? Yeah. All right. I'm going to call the meeting to order. We'll say the Pledge of Allegiance, and then we'll go right into candidate interviews. So let's begin.
Of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. We need to, first of all, in establishing the agenda order, I have one comment to make, which is that Mr. Gallagher has withdrawn his name from consideration. He emailed Bob just a little bit ago to let him know that. So we'll be obviously skipping him and going straight to Ms. Jordan. And then because candidates were told to arrive 30 minutes before their interview time, we'll try to go in order, in the order that it is on the agenda. But if one candidate is here and the next one on the agenda isn't, we'll just go with who's here and make sure that we get everybody in. Okay. Does anybody else have questions about the agenda order? All right. Approval of minutes. Are there any changes to the minutes from last night? Okay. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
I second.
All in favor? Opposed? All right. Let's get into candidate interviews. Ms. Jordan, you can come up and I'll review with you. I know you were emailed these guidelines, but I'll go over them again when you're ready. So you'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement, and then each commissioner, starting on my right and going to the left, will have 3 minutes to ask you questions and for you to answer them. When you're at 30 seconds left, the yellow light will show, and when your time is up, the red light will come on. And you're welcome to stand at the podium to make your opening statement and sit while you're answering questions, or if you'd like to stand the whole time, you're welcome to do that as well, and you can start whenever you're ready.
Thank you so much. Normally I would be doing this extemporaneously, but since I want to stay within the allotted time slot, I'm just going to read the statement that I've prepared. So first and foremost, I want to say good evening, and I'd like to extend my sincerest gratitude to each of you for taking the time to serve on the commission and assisting in the arduous yet essential task of choosing the next at-large member to serve on the board. My name is Sheena Jordan, and my interest in serving on the board stems from my interest in our most precious gifts, our children. As a previous graduate of public school systems, a present-day educator with 16 years plus experience in the public school system myself, and a current parent of a rising first grader in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, I truly recognize the value in public education and understand that it is unprecedented in our world today. If selected to serve as a board member, I understand that we have the responsibility to make decisions that will affect the livelihood of our children, and in many cases, we're essentially making decisions to prepare our scholars currently for jobs that don't even exist in present day. As a member of the school board, I would actively involve myself in the communities to offer support and provide a voice for the at-large community. As a board member, I understand that one of the main obligations involves working towards and implementing policies that will equip our scholars as 21st century learners with the tools necessary to succeed in the future and to become responsible world-class citizens. This philosophy is a central component in our own mission statement here at Anne Arundel County Public Schools, that we're striving to educate all of our students to be well prepared for college and the workforce, and to empower them to create a better quality of life for themselves, their communities, and the next generation. If chosen to serve, I recognize that all board members need to be committed to this mission. And I plan to ensure that all of our children feel welcomed no matter what race, gender, religion, or socioeconomic background that they come from, and no matter what school they attend. Our Board of Education at Anne Arundel County Public Schools has the opportunity right now to serve as a truly exemplary model for our children, as proof that many different faces of different colors can unite together, that speak different languages can unite together with one shared common vision, providing the best educational experience for our children. And with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to entertaining the questions.
Hi, good evening. I'll let you sit down and get comfortable so we can, before we go down the line of questions.
Thank you so much.
So I'm Mariko Bennett, and I am representing the NAACP here in Anne Arundel County. And so my questions are going to be around diversity initiatives here in the county. What initiatives would you bring to the county to ensure that we're identifying, recruiting, and retaining educators of color?
Well, currently I do know that there is I know that there's a job fair promoting specifically for diversity. So I think that that's a great practice. I would definitely promote that we continue with that practice. I would also like to see if we could maybe branch out and recruit at historically black colleges, and just maybe more of a conscientious recruiting effort. I think one thing that is valuable is seeing people that look similar to you in those current positions. So outside of just including human resources, I think it would be important to seek out teachers and administrators that are of color, that speak those particular languages, that come from those different backgrounds and religions, and use them to help with the recruiting process. Because those questions sometimes that a person may have of a particular minority can sometimes best be answered by someone who's walked in those same shoes.
I'm going to ask another question around poverty and resources. So here in Anne Arundel County, we have areas of poverty, pockets of poverty. What would be your plan to ensure equitable distribution of resources in Anne Arundel County?
First and foremost, I feel that it's necessary to do what I consider a needs assessment, and I think that that can best be done by visiting those actual schools that you're mentioning. I spoke to it somewhat in the application. I feel that I would need to have, as a board member, have conversations with the parents, the administrators, the educators at that school, because they know what resources they need. For me, as a board member, that would be my position and stance that I would take, would be listening and having those dialogues with the people that are involved, that it's affecting the most.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Leanne Carmona, and I represent the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. You mentioned zero tolerance in your application. So let me ask you, what are your thoughts on zero tolerance policies and suspensions for behavioral incidents?
I did speak to zero tolerance within my application. I do believe in zero tolerance when it comes to certain aspects, and one of them I spoke to in my actual application dealt with racial relations. But I also think that bullying factors into that as well. I think we need to set a precedence that it's a zero tolerance for that. We're not going to stand for that, because as a priority, as an educator, I think safety is the main issue there. With regards to suspensions, I do understand and know very well the laws with IDEA, and I recognize that there's other things that can be done. Suspension is not always the route that needs to be taken. I think that we need to take into account the actual IEP plans, speak to the educators that work with those particular scholars, and seek out some different ways, because it doesn't always have, suspension is not the only route. I believe that PBIS works. I think that positive behavior, promoting that as a way, because I feel like suspension is more so reactive. I think that we need to put policies in place that are more proactive, and that would encourage students to do the right thing and not bring attention to students that are doing the wrong thing, but more so uplift when students are doing the right thing.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening.
Thank you for coming and being here early.
Oh, no problem.
I'm Estefania Holler, and I'm representing the County Council PTAs. I have a question for you. I know you've only been in the county for a year, but I've had a lot of experience on the PG County sector. And so with that said, what aspects of our school system do you have the least knowledge about, and how would you be able to educate yourself on those things that you're not familiar with during the time you're on the board?
That's a great question. I feel that one area that I would like to expand and grow in would be learning about the best practices in the secondary schools. Right now, my daughter is a rising first grader in Piney Orchard, so I do know a lot about the elementary school best practices like Triple E, which I think is great. I'm actually an educator at an IB school, so I know a lot about the International Baccalaureate curriculum, but I would like to find out more about what's going on in our secondary schools. I did do some research, and I looked up CAT North and CAT South, but I would like to see it in practice. And I think that is something that's important. As a board member at large, you actually need to visit and see the community and see things going on, because although the website is plentiful, you can't get the same experience as if you actually go out and meet and talk to people that are involved in the processes.
So more to follow up, you know that it is a full-time position in a way, because you want to put your best foot forward. So what would be one of the best things you're going to do to make sure people know that you are part of the board and that you're there to, you know, help them as well as educate yourself on what is needed for the county?
Well, I think social media is a great platform because people can reach out at any time of day, any time of night. So I would definitely use social media as a platform to open those doors of communication, and, you know, just utilizing the time that I do have to go in the community, set up, maybe even setting up some meet and greet sessions, because being that I'm a new face, I'm sure that they would have questions to ask me as well as I would have questions for them. So
Thank you very much.
you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Ginger Vance, Ms. Jordan, and I'm representing the Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce. They've appointed me. So my question is going to be geared towards businesses. And I enjoyed reading the paragraph where you wrote about setting up informal meet and greets at local libraries as a board member and reaching out in a non-threatening environment. It's a little bit different, but I'm going to parallel that kind of activity and ask you if you would consider some sort of activity like that, or another activity, or if you have done it in the past, I'd like to hear about it as well, to work on building stronger relationships with the business community.
No, I've never done a meet and greet with corporate sponsors or corporate offices, but one of the things that I do think of when I think of establishing partnerships, the first thing I think of is banks. And I have communicated with actually the community bank, which is Sandy Spring Bank at Piney Orchard. And I've talked to them about, you know, things that they could do, and they're very receptive about coming out and talking to the kids about financial literacy. And the actual bank manager referred me to, they have a community relations specialist, and speaking to my husband, who actually is a business banker, he said that most banks do have that. They do have a community relations specialist. And I think that's a great avenue because all businesses, regardless of how large or small, have to go through a bank. So that's at least a way to get the foot in the door. You know, establishing and building those partnerships with the banks, and then hopefully maybe they'll be willing to kind of talk to some of their corporate partners that they work with and say, you know, we worked with this great school, Piney Orchard, the kids are really receptive, and maybe just having those dialogues to just get the information out there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Allison Pickard, and I'm with the Anne Arundel County Council of PTAs.
Okay.
My question, I was curious if you had a chance to look at the board handbook that was emailed out.
Yes, ma'am.
And also, I wanted you to describe your understanding of the time commitment of being on a being on the Board of Education, and how that fits with your professional and personal life.
I did have a chance to look at the board member handbook. I do understand that it is quite a commitment with regards to the time piece. I was able to pull up, what I was most concerned about was the meeting schedule. I'm definitely, I would be committed to coming to all of the meetings. I certainly know that I would not have any issues coming to the evening meetings. The biggest concern for me would be the ones that were during the day. However, I am a tenured teacher in my particular county, so I do have some leeway with regards to that as far as taking time off when, when it's necessary. But I'm great with time management. I know that any information that I was required to read or review prior to a board meeting, that wouldn't be an issue at all. As somebody who's just completed my Admin 1 certificate while being a mother, while being a full-time teacher, I know that I'd be able to juggle that piece of it.
Just for your information, there is a requirement that board members attend 75% of all scheduled meetings. Correct me if I'm wrong, anybody. That's in new. So just, you may want to reflect on last year's board meeting schedule, because there is a lot of daytime work involved.
Activities.
So just something
Okay.
to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ms. Jordan, I'm Jerry Klassmeyer with the Anne Arundel County Community College Board of Trustees. I was very impressed with the answers to the 4 questions expressed in the application. I was intrigued by one answer or one comment you made, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that. You indicated that you believe there is a deficiency in representation on the board of a voice for the current state of AACPS. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Certainly. I like to do research before I apply for things, so I did certainly pull up the board members, and I pulled up each one. I don't remember specific names, but I found that there were many board members that had several years living in the county, some of them 40-plus years, which is great, and I think that that's important. You need that voice there, those that understand where the county has come from. I also found that many of the board members who did have children had children that had already graduated. There was one board member who actually has a son who's now teaching in the county, which is awesome. He's teaching math. But I found there were very few board members that had younger children like myself. And I just feel like that's more of a representation of the present day. And of course, I made mention to the student board member, of course, can be the voice of the future direction of where the county is going. But it was basically based on the research that I did studying and reading the bios of each board member.
The only other thing I'd comment relative to the comment about the time required to serve on the board. My personal experience has been for every hour you spend at the meeting, there's several hours of preparation in order to make sure that you're coming to the meeting and not wasting your time and everybody else's time. So in your thought process to figure out what that time commitment is, you might factor that in.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dr. Linda Ferrara, and I'm representing the Association of Educational Leaders, which is the administration of principals, etc. How do you define consensus? This is a three-part question. Give an example of where you have built consensus, and how did you build it?
Okay. First, consensus, when I think of consensus, I think of a meeting of the minds, and it's coming together and agreeing on one accord. So that would be the definition. With regards to building consensus, I think that it has a lot to do with the foundation and establishing a relationship of trust. I think it's a lot easier to come to a consensus when you know that everyone and you trust that everyone has the best interest in mind. And for an example of that, I'll use the classroom situation. To get a class of fifth graders to come to a consensus in September is a whole lot more difficult than it is in May. And I would say that the reasoning behind that is because there's not that establishment of trust built up yet. I don't know that the children really understand and trust that I want what's in the best interest for them and for each other with regards to their peers. But come May, it's a lot easier to come to consensus when we have to do that. So that's what I would say with regards to how do you build it. It's definitely based on making sure there's a foundation of trust there. And then an example of it is I'm a team leader at my school, a specialist team leader, and I'm over the fine arts department, basically. I teach Spanish, but PE, music, art, media, and we had to come to a consensus on meeting times, the best time to meet. And there were some teachers who said, oh, I can't meet at this particular time. I have to do this, that, or the other because we have time constraints in a very short time period for our planning period. So the best way that we did that is I decided that we would have lunch actually at the meeting as opposed to trying to do the 30 minutes of lunch prior and then doing the meeting after. And we came to a consensus, and it just happened to work.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Penny Cantwell, and I'm representing the Central Maryland Chamber. So I guess what I would like to ask is if you could provide your definition, your vision of what a successful Anne Arundel County Public School student would look like.
I would say that a successful Anne Arundel County public school student to me would be one that could flourish in any environment. And the reason that I say that is because when I attended the strategic planning meeting, I had an in-depth conversation with a counselor who actually was within my group. And she mentioned that many Anne Arundel County public school graduates don't go on to move beyond the county. The statistics, according to this particular counselor, show that students stay here within the county. And I think it's okay, but I would like to see that a student is comfortable enough to know that part of our mission is we want to raise world-class citizens. So being able to survive and navigate and be career ready in Anne Arundel County is a lot different than being career ready in New York City or who knows, Hong Kong or Beijing. And I would like to see students that have the skills necessary to actually become world-class citizens. where if they secure a job here in Anne Arundel County, they'll succeed at that. But if given the opportunity to move to some other state or city or even country, that they'll be able to do that, that we've provided them with the skills to be globally competitive. That's what I feel would be a success story.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Brandenburg with the County Executive's Office, County Executive's appointee. Thank you very much for putting your application in and for being here and going through this process. I'm hoping you can take a few minutes and describe the role and responsibility of a Board of Education member, and then with that is the relationship with the superintendent and in your how you see that.
Certainly. I like to use analogies. I do it often with my students because I feel like they can, it's more of a real world application. So the way that I look at it is at the heart of the school system, we have the children. They're our cardiovascular unit, if you will. And then as the pulmonary supporting system would be the teachers, the educators, the paraeducators, the administrators. They're there providing that oxygen, which in this case, the oxygen is the information that they need to succeed. And so that the teachers are providing the oxygen and the children are sending that oxygenated blood back out up to the brain, which I look at the Board of Education functions more so like the brain, the nervous system. And I look at the superintendent kind of as the spinal cord. And those could sometimes be interchangeable. The board could sometimes be the spinal cord, providing the support based on whatever strategic plan or whatever budget the superintendent supports. But I look at it as the board is kind of like the brain, and the superintendent is that support system, that backbone. But you need all of it to function and to really make the body move. All of those components are necessary.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hi, my name is Josie Rhea, and I represent the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils. So in your application, you say, I want to visit schools and have open dialogue with parents, staff, and administrators to have a better understanding of what they feel the key issues are. Now, along with that, how do you plan to have make sure you represent the student voice as well?
Great question. I feel like students like to be talked to. I don't know if it's a practice in this county, but in the county where I work, they do what's called learning walks. And part of the learning walks, you're observing the classroom. So in a sense, you're observing the teacher. But a major part and a major component of that learning walk is talking to the students. You talk to the students and you say, hey, you know what is this you're doing here? Just to see if they really understand. So I think that talking to students when you visit the schools, that's very important. I would go through the administrator to see what's the best way to speak to the kids, or maybe when is the most opportune time, because I wouldn't want to disrupt the school day, and I understand that. And I know that there's certain times when it's maybe better to enter in a classroom or better to maybe pull a small group of students. I would love to visit, like, for instance, student council meetings. I would love to just sit in on a meeting and see what's going on, because I feel like you can find out so much about what's happening in a school and what students at that particular school feel really compelled about and are really passionate about.
Just a minor question. Why do you specifically say student councils?
Student council because it's the governing body, and I think that it's in a sense, it's a parallel component to the board, because the board is the governing body, if you will, of the school system and the way that it functions. And I think that the student council is more or less the governing body of the students and the way that things occur at a high school.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I am Susanna Kipke. I am also an appointee of the county executive. and the chairman of this commission. I have a question specific to your work. So you are a teacher in the Prince George's County school system, correct?
Yes.
So can you tell me do you think that gives you some advantage in a way because you have just a different perspective? You are intimately familiar with another school system so that you could bring in, as you said, many of our school board members have lived here for a long time. Do you think you could bring in another perspective just having such intimate knowledge of another school system?
I wouldn't say that just my experience as a teacher at Prince George's County. I would say my experience as an educator as a whole, because I've taught actually at Prince George's County. I've had the opportunity to work actually at a charter school in the District of Columbia. And I've also taught at a very elite independent school in New York. So I'm an educator by trade. So that I feel could bring in another perspective, because I have the perspective of the public, the charter, and the independent sector. And also, I'm a little unique in the aspect that because I teach Spanish, I've actually taught students from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. So whereas some teachers, like an elementary school teacher may have only be familiar with children or methodologies from K through 5, I actually have more of a span when it comes to that. You're welcome.
That's everyone. So if you have additional comments or you feel like there were anything left unsaid, you're welcome to submit any additional comments or testimony or anything to the same place where you handed in your application after this, and that'll be sent to us and it'll be published on the website along with your application.
Okay, thank you. I had one question. The individuals who aren't here this evening, should I be checking my email? Will they send maybe questions that they would like for me to follow up? I'd like to definitely open the floor for that if they're interested.
They'll be watching this, so they'll know that now. Okay. Because they are all sorry that they're missing, and they're definitely going to watch the tape of it, or not tape anymore. The
right.
online streaming of it afterward.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. going to come back and get started. Good evening.
I like it.
You are Mr. Westervelt?
I am Bill Westervelt.
Wonderful. Well, welcome. Thank you for being flexible with the times. I know you had this emailed to you, but I'll go over the outline of the procedure that we'll use. So you'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement. When you have 30 seconds left, the light in the front will show yellow. When your time is up, it'll show red. Each commissioner will go from my right to left. Each commissioner will have 3 minutes to ask and have questions answered. Again, your light will turn yellow at 30 seconds and red at the end. If you feel at the end that there's anything that's been left unsaid or that you'd like to add, you're welcome to add written comments that you can send in or turn in by hand to the same place where you turned in your application.
So, do you have a pad? I thought you may have a pad for me. I have. Thanks, Molly. I may have some.
Do you need
want to write down some stuff? You have a pen? Yeah, of course. Got a pen.
All right. You can begin whenever you're ready.
Oh, okay. Bill Westervelt, William J. Westervelt Jr. That's my full name. I've lived in Anne Arundel County since 1986. I live in Arnold, back off Joyce Lane. It's a real paradise back there. I'm married to Laura Westervelt. We've been married 20 years. No kids, no children. Plenty of nieces and nephews that we try to help along this world. I'm going to make this short. So my life has been basically business. I graduated from Bel Air High School. I'm not going to tell you the year, but I did have to give a little speech to a group of students from Harford County that were getting scholarships, and their graduating year is 2017. And I did say to them in the beginning that I really don't know what to say to somebody that's graduating in 2017, other than we have 7 in our graduating year. Mine was 1976. So I went on to talk a little bit about them, and did you know what generation the class of 2017 is? Guesses? Called Generation C. And I'm millennials, so Generation C. We can talk about that a little bit later. But they just think differently. It's more of an attitude. It's about connection, cooperation, digital communities, etc. So I try to do what they would do when I was asked for this assignment, and that was to go right to the internet and find out about them. That's what they would do. So anyway, graduated from Bel Air High School, then went to a school called Western Maryland College. It's the first co-ed school in Maryland. It formed in 1867. It's now called McDaniel. If you want to know why it's called McDaniel, raise your hand. It's not, no one wants to know. It's not a big donor. It's somebody that was a teacher, a professor, an alum, and went to the school in the 1800s. And so he answered to all, or a part of all, constituencies that we were concerned with. Western Maryland College, biggest problem is it's not a state school. It started as a Methodist school, and if the president of Western Maryland College hadn't been the president of the Western Maryland Railroad, it would have been called Maryland Wesleyan. And then he graduated with a BA in economics, spent 2.5 years in the Army during a tough time. And then I got my MBA from University of Baltimore in finance and marketing, and went to work for a bank called First National Bank of Maryland. Spent 15 years there. I got fired twice, once from there, once from another company in Atlanta, and decided that I ought to start my own company. And I did. What's that? That's the conclusion of your opening statement. Perfect. I'm done. 3 minutes went pretty fast.
Good evening. My name is Mariko Bennett, and I'm representing the NAACP here in Anne Arundel County this evening. So I'm going to talk to you and ask questions around diversity and inclusion. And so we'll start with the first question of, what initiatives would you bring to the county to ensure that we're identifying, recruiting, and retaining educators of color? You've been in the county for quite some time, and so you've seen the demographics, I'm sure, change with that. And so what would you do to add that diversity into the school?
So I'm still on the board of McDaniel College. I've been on the board of McDaniel College for 15 years, and one of our issues has been diversity. And I don't look at diversity in terms of color. Diversity to me is in terms of what people want to do, what the structure of the curriculum ought to be, and the like. All that said, it is very important to the board of McDaniel, and over the 15 years that I've been there, we took people of color, that's how to categorize them, from 2% of the student body to over 32% of the student body, which has been very, very important to us. I think it's an important subject. I think we need to make sure that we're educating all different types of people to all different types of situations and different careers.
How did you all increase? What were some of the ways in which you went from a 2% to a 30 plus?
We worked with organizations in Baltimore. We worked in organizations in D.C. We created programs where we brought diverse students or applicants into the school. We showed them the school. We almost wanted to match the population structure of the country, and as that moved, whether it was black, whether it was Hispanic, whether it was Asian, whatever the category, we felt we needed to represent the country in general, and that's what was driving our process for the most part.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
My name is Leanne Carmona, and I represent the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. I read through your application, and you said you don't have much exposure or experience with AACPS. This is a huge district with many critical issues. How will you educate yourself, catch yourself up to speed on those issues?
I didn't understand your acronym.
Oh, Anne Arundel County Public Schools, AACPS.
Okay. So I'm not an educator per se. I'm not from the education community or profession, and just felt that a business perspective on students, on education is important. All that said, I did create a number of different companies, a company here in Anne Arundel County called First Annapolis, where we interviewed a lot of students and we reviewed a lot of students. And one thing is we didn't always rely on test scores. So when you look at your website, it does talk about test scores and the like, because test scores don't always indicate how effective a student will be. And what we also looked at is grade point average. Because if we found that, and this goes to some of the diversity, that if English wasn't your first language, you were not going to score as high on a standardized test. You just weren't. However, if your GPA was high, if your class ranking was high, we keep class ranking, that indicated work ethic. That indicated a different measurement. And we found that balancing that was very important with students coming out of this county. I don't know if that answered your question, but I tried to.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Estefania Holler, and I represent the County Council PTA. My question is
The County Council PTA.
Yes, the Anne Arundel County Council PTA.
Is that different than a regular PTA? I'm just
We
asking
oversee the PTAs in the Anne Arundel County.
Okay, thank you.
So my question is basically on your application. Question number 3, we said, please share any current Anne Arundel County Public Schools best practice and procedures you're familiar with and how you feel the initiative benefits students in the community. But you said you're not familiar with the Anne Arundel County Public School System practice and procedures. And since your application and now, have you had any time to look into it? And if you have, what are Do you have any opinions on your best practices and procedures?
So one of the things that when I filled out that application, I actually thought it was biased toward people that were from the education field. But I wanted to be very, very candid and accurate in my answer. I'll go back to some of the board experiences I have at McDaniel, and that is meeting with parents, trying to communicate what McDaniel is about in terms of small classrooms and specialized areas. And so I understand how important it is. I don't have any children, so I don't want to say that I've been to a lot of PTA meetings. I can tell you that my mother went to PTA meetings from 1949 to 1969, so she had a little bit of experience that she would share with me.
So to follow up on that, what would you do to actually expose yourself more to the Anne Arundel County public school system and the PTA?
Can I go to the
parents?
meetings?
They're open, yes. All of them are open to the public.
I'll learn. I'll go to the
Perfect.
meetings. I'll hear the issues.
Thank you very much.
Hi, Mr. Westerhout.
Hi.
My name is Ginger Vance, and I represent the Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce. And I liked your sentence when you were answering what do you believe to be one of the most critical issues facing Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and how would you address them? And you believe that one of the most critical issues is maintaining educational independence while working with community organizations. And then you then state, and generally working with the private sector in a coordinated fashion to produce the finest students. I was wondering if you could bring a little specificity to that, and tell me what you mean by working with the private sector in a coordinated fashion.
So as I looked at the people that were involved in the Board of Education, and as I spent with Steve Shue, so I hope my 3 minutes doesn't. So I supported Laura Newman, but because she tried to get a job at First Annapolis, and we didn't hire her. So, but in any event, but I told Steve if he won, I'd support him 150%, which I did. And the first job he gave me was Transition Committee for the Department of Public Works. And if you've ever worked for the Department of Public Works in a number of areas they're covered, you'll find that it's interesting. But as I work through BTW and then the commission that I'm heading now, I didn't see any structured programs in terms of what we were doing as a county with the private sector. And were we meeting with people that can help us from the private sector? I mean, when I had First Annapolis Consulting, we hired over 150 people in the 15 years that I ran it. And I'll tell you, I never, and we interviewed a lot of kids, both as analysts at a school and college and as MBAs. And I never got one call from Anne Arundel County, from the state, saying, hey, can we help you find quality students? The orange light's on. The only thing I did is when we were very successful, I got a call from the Maryland Tax Revenue Administration making sure that my tax records were straight. And so I don't know exactly how to solve it, but it's very, very important for guys like me that have operated many companies to know what's available and how we can talk to students in a tough forum. And by tough, I mean giving them case studies. I don't care necessarily how smart they are. I want to think about how they think.
Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Allison Pickard, and I'm the president of the County Council of PTAs. We have 2 seats on this commission. Thank you for coming out tonight.
Thank you.
I wanted you to sort of give me your thoughts, or give us your thoughts on parent and community involvement in the decision making of our school system and the Board of Education, and what you think you could do to increase and encourage that process.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
How come there's two?
That's the way the legislation was written. The
Is
county
there-
executive
is
has
there a
two.
weighted
and-
average that's important in that category? Just
I don't know. There's
curious.
80,000 something students with parents.
81,000 according to your website.
I didn't write the legislation, so the county executive has two as well.
Okay.
It's well balanced.
So I don't know the exact answer to your question. I will tell you that I don't mind working real hard, and I need to learn more about that. And the only way I can learn, I think one important way, is to attend the open meetings that I can attend and hear what the parents have to say. I will tell you this: having 14 nieces and nephews, parents are a lot more vocal than I remember, and that was a long time ago. And balancing that must be an important task, and I actually think I can help in that.
Thank you.
Mr. Westerveld, I'm Jerry Klassmeyer. I represent the Anne Arundel County Community College Board of Trustees. Looking at your application, I would have to say that you would probably represent the consummate outsider
For sure.
in terms of
I figured I didn't have a chance, but I was going to do it anyway.
and interest on serving on this board for the reasons that you've already spoken to. You know, at the national level, we have a businessman who is trying to convert to the government with mixed success so far. What kind of experience do you think you're going to experience when you wind up being on a board and involved in a bureaucracy? And are you going to have the patience to contend with that kind of challenge?
Yes, but that will not mean I won't be candid in terms of my remarks, in terms of the work I do. I just think it's important as I looked at the different people, and this is no criticism of the organizations today, but I didn't see business people, and we just think a little differently, and when we talked about diversity earlier, there's more than just classic diversity. There's diversity of thought and diversity of experience. And since I got familiar with the Transition Committee, since I got familiar with this Commission of Innovation and Efficiency, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot, and from that experience, I figured I could help.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Dr. Linda Ferrara, and I represent the Association of Educational Leaders. That's the administration in Anne Arundel County. My question has three parts. The first is, how do you define consensus? The second part is, how do you achieve consensus? And give an example of how you were able to do this.
So, in a business environment, consensus management is important, but it also leads to decisions that are less risky, that are middle of the road, and so, from my perspective, building consensus is important. But understanding the consequences of that consensus is as important, because it sometimes leads to softer decisions, easier decisions, and so having a consulting company that had 30 partners that all thought they were the best and smartest and knew all the right answers to everything. The one thing about smart people is they always think they're right, and they always can make a great argument of why they're right. And so trying to build consensus about with really bright people is sometimes very, very hard. And running a company of 100 people that were consultants is very, very hard. I was able to build consensus, but more from what the objective was than consensus itself. That's one part. Is there 2 parts, 3 parts? Did I not get the 2 or 3 parts? Or?
How did you achieve that?
We looked at the objective. We looked at what we were trying to do. What type of staff were we trying to build? What kind of schools do we want to go to build that staff? What were the implications of that? And of course, there's always a financial implication to what you're doing there. So that drove it.
Thank you.
Sorry. Did you get your 3rd part in?
Pardon?
Didn't you say you on 3?
It was a 3-part question.
Okay, I know.
Yes.
I don't remember if I got the 3rd part.
I thought the last
Okay,
part
thanks.
you just gave. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Penny Cantwell, and I'm representing the Central Maryland Chamber. So my question is, please share your vision or a description of what you would consider a successful student in Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
So a successful student or a successful graduate? Successful student?
Well, hopefully the 2 would collide at some point. So.
Collide's a good word. My best example of that would be rock and roll revival at Severna Park High School.
Personal favorite, so okay.
Been going to them for 10 years, as long as they've been doing them. And to me, it just brought different groups of students together. It brought the artistic group, as you say. It brought the jocks together. It brought people and students that would not normally participate in together. So whatever we can do to make students participate in a broader spectrum with each other is really, really important. I don't know how to do that. I'll help find out, try to figure it out. I know rock and roll revival does, because when you talk to the kids, they'll say the same things. They love some of the football players that throw them around the dance floor, and that's my answer.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Brandenburg. I'm with the County Executive's Office. I'm one of his appointees. Thank you very much for coming down tonight and putting your application in.
Today was Steve's birthday. Do you know that?
We had carrot cake. I had a very large slice. Managed to skip dinner. Yes, I did know. It was a fun office, a fun afternoon in the office. You've answered the questions succinctly and fantastic. I don't have any particular questions. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Josie Rea, and I represent the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils, and I also attend Severna Park High School. Love rock and roll.
Did you participate?
No, I didn't.
Come on, did you go out?
I did see it, though, yeah. It was a good show this year.
Participate if you don't go out.
True. But my question is, what 3 aspects of a student do you think, what are the 3 main aspects in which a student can grow? What do you think the 3 most important ones are?
So I'll boil it down to one.
Okay.
And that is the ability to problem solve. So when I look at a student, I do look at their GPA, I do look at their test scores, and then the questions and the way I interview is the way that they think. So I'll give them a case, and there's no right answer to the case, but it's the way they approach the case. Is it a financial case? Is it a marketing case? Is it a management issue? Because I was more interested in how the students would answer that question. And so that's how I think we have to work with students. And I want them to think about how they'll solve certain situations on the educational background that we give them, because there's many, many different solutions to many different problems. So.
Okay. And being a board member, how do you plan on making sure your decisions represent the true student voice?
I have to participate. I mean, I have to know students. I want to know them more.
Well, how would you do that?
However you tell me to do it. I mean, I don't have the answer to that, because that's what working with everybody here has to educate me on. I'm not afraid of working. I know this will be a 20 to 30 hour a week, maybe more, endeavor. I'm not afraid of working. And so I know I have a lot to learn. But I view that as a challenge.
Okay. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
may I have one more follow-up question?
Sure.
Well, I don't think it's in the rules that you can.
You can, and I'll answer it.
But let's see what time it is. I think that we each get 3 minutes for our questions.
I don't think I used my 3.
All right. You can have her 3.
I've just
Commissioner
gotta-
Brandenburg gave you her 3. There you go.
Mr. Westervelt, I've got to ask this question. What would be your personal objective in serving on the board? What motivates you to want to be on the board, and what would you try to achieve in the relatively short period of time that you would be on the board?
In a relatively short period of time, seeing how much I can give back. I've been a successful businessman. I don't have to worry about a lot of things that a lot of other people have to worry about. And I like the notion of giving back. And so I'll be honest, folks, I don't know everything I can give back, but I know I can. I know I can learn it. I know I can offer a different perspective on stuff. I know that you're not always going to like my perspective, but I think that's healthy for everybody in the room. And as you mentioned, I'm a little bit different candidate than some of the people that I reviewed.
I am Susanna Kipke. I'm also an appointee of the county executive, and actually, Commissioner Klaasmeyer asked the question I was going to ask, so that's all right. So I don't have any questions, but if you have any follow-up comments, as I said, you can submit those to the same place where you submitted your application. And I think I'm the last person, so thank you very much for coming, and have a good night.
Yeah, well, thanks for your time. I know you've been doing this a lot, and I know how tough it is. But you can remember me by my orange tie and handkerchief and bald head, so maybe that'll help you differentiate it. So,
thank you.
I have to say one thing. I know I'm out of time. But C's, Generation C's, like creativity. From their class structure to their classrooms, from their office structure to the food they eat, to the clothes they wear, and all these crazy stocks.
Mr. Westervelt, we have to conclude. I'm sorry. We have to conclude in the interest of fairness to the other candidates. We can't allow you to make a closing statement when we haven't allowed anyone else to.
Okay. Thanks,
Thank you very much.
I know it's a hard job. I'm going to take your pad. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. Would you like to take a break? Commissioner Ferrara has asked to take a break. Is anyone opposed? All right, let's take a quick break.
Linda, are you coming back?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you for being flexible in the time. I understand you got here early to accommodate our new schedule. Hold on just a minute. Let me.
I learned to do what I was told.
Yes. All right. We're beginning, folks. I'm sorry, yeah. Oh, we don't have everybody. We don't have, all right.
It's the alarm. They didn't tag before they went in the door.
If you can listen to me past the alarm, I'll go over the interview structure while we're waiting for our last commissioner to return. So I know that this was in an email to you, but I'll just quickly go over it so it's fresh in your mind. You'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement. Then each commissioner will ask you a question or two, and you'll respond, and that whole interaction you'll have 3 minutes for it per commissioner. When you're at 30 seconds left, the light will turn yellow in front of you. When your time is up, the light will turn red, and we'll move on to the next commissioner. At the end, if you feel like there are comments that you've left unsaid or questions that you didn't get to answer, or you have additional comments, feel free to email or hand deliver additional comments to the same place where you submitted your initial application, and those comments will be sent to us, and they'll be posted online along with your application. So you can begin whenever you're ready.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Kevin Jackson, and I'm seeking the vacant at-large seat on the Anne Arundel County Board of Education. Having been through a similar process in 2008, 2009, 2015, and now 2017, I sincerely thank you for the opportunity to speak this evening. I appreciate all the hours you have spent and will spend executing your duty to find just the right person to serve on the Board of Education. I can tell you, having served in this boardroom for just over 2,190 days, I left the Board of Education just 24 months ago, having been a part of a very collaborative team of community members that examined 6 board budgets in my tenure, approved 1 strategic plan, agreed to numerous projects surrounding numerous facilities, voted on over 125 board policies, and submitted to the state superintendent 3 different people to serve as superintendent or interim superintendent of schools. Away from the boardroom, where we learned even more as members, I visited schools and was engaged in my community, all while still finding time to visit the classroom and the school library to read to children. It is humbling and amazing to see kids play and to compete in high school sports, in the arts across our county, as well as in our CAT centers. The journey is exhilarating for each of us. We do it together because we believe gathering together, creating consensus, building relationships, challenging our rising seniors to embrace new opportunities similar to what our student member of the board experiences every year. We together can and will do more and be an educated community that is caring, that is kind, and that is compassionate. This commission exists because there are so many important areas and values that must be represented at the table. There's little room for error on this important work of boards because the stakes are so high for our children. Our diversity in the commission and on the Board of Education is critical to our success. Did you know that there is not one board member that lives south of Highway 214 in Anne Arundel County today? Geographical diversity matters. That is not to say that you won't see me in District 1. You did in the past and you would in the future. Diversity matters for gender, race, background, and experience. There are no individuals with military or DoD acquisition experience currently on the board. I would offer up a different experience in the boardroom, caucus room, and community should I receive your vote. I gladly offer my talent with a hope that you will find me highly qualified to assist in our county vision. Please know this journey is not about me. It is about our children and how we move a system of educators and our community to help our children to be ready for what life will throw at them. Until you have seen a special education 12th grade completer or graduation and the tears roll down your eyes as they celebrate, you have not seen life. CCAC rocks. And so does every other organization represented here tonight. Thank you again for your time tonight. I appreciate your patience and consideration.
Excellent. So my name's Mariko Bennett, and I'm representing the NAACP here in Anne Arundel County this evening. Impressive resume, impressive responses, but I don't expect anything less because you served for so long on the board. And so with that being said, I look forward to your answers to these questions. I'm going to ask you about I don't need to talk about specifically the racial incidents that have happened because you've served for so long. So if I were to talk about the recent ones, you know about them, I'm sure, and you probably know about some that I don't even know about, being newer to the county. So can you tell me what you think the school board's role in addressing these types of disturbing issues, such as the news hanging at Crofton Middle and the letter that circulated at the cafeteria lunch hour at Arundel High School? Tell me what you think the board's role should be.
Absolutely. It's to ensure the cultural sensitivity across our county. One of the things I mentioned in my opening remarks had to do with being caring, kind, and compassionate. We've got to make that link associated with, yes, educating our kids, not just educating them about numbers and those things, which are extremely important, but from the time we put our kid on a bus to the time that kid gets off the bus, if they're a bus rider, or from the time that a child is dropped off at school and they see the first educator when they walk in the school, they've got to understand the associated sensitivities of being kind, caring, and compassionate. It's so critical. It's the soft skills in life. We talk about, I've heard, what do we want an Anne Arundel County child to look like as they grow up? We want them to be engaged citizens in our community. We want them to be able to pay taxes. We want them to be able to be respectful of the rule of law. How do we get them there? We get them there by teaching them, yes, the arithmetic and the math and the reading and the writing and those things, but we also have to teach our kids, and we've got to put the right educators in place, educational leaders in place within our Board of Education to make sure that those are expectations that are shared across our educators in the classroom as well as in the administration in our local community schools. I could go on a lot more, but I'll stop there.
Okay, thank you. So I can add a follow-up question to that. So with that being said, you talked about, who's in the building. And so let's talk about diversity as it relates to our staff, our teaching staff. How do we recruit and retain diversity within our teacher staff?
Absolutely. We have what's called within our school system the Diversity Recruitment Weekend. And I participated by being an opening speaker, a closing speaker, other things to encourage a diverse educational population in our schools. Diversity from a school perspective also can mean a white male as well, because we don't have a whole lot of white males that are educators in the classroom. So it's not just about just African Americans or that, or just Hispanics or that. It's much broader than that. It's also about making
Mr.
sure we go to schools. Yes, ma'am.
I have to ask you to conclude your answer, please.
That's all I get. But thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
I hope I answered the question, though.
Good evening. I'm
Yes, ma'am.
Leanne Carmona, and I represent the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. We often talk about the achievement gap, which we can measure with test scores, but being proficient on the park can only get us so far in life. Other areas of development like social emotional development, communication skills, and soft skills, which you mentioned earlier, are very important to be successful. So my question for you is, what can the district do to make sure our graduates have those skills?
Well, I think it's some of it's about hiring the right people. Some of it's about training the right people. And some of it's about holding and having expectations for those folks that are a part of our staff here. It's a cool thing to come to the western side of the Chesapeake. We need to celebrate that. And then we have to tell people, if you want to join that, there are expectations that we have to make sure that we're not just teaching math, science, engineering, technology. We are teaching those things. And those are cool things here in Anne Arundel County, but we're also teaching the other softer skills that we expect our educators to be able to convey to our students, and to create the right environment that allows all of us to learn in both different areas.
So how could we integrate that a little bit better? Because there are definitely students graduating from high school and they are, living in their parents' basement. They passed all their tests. They had good grades, but they still don't have those skills.
Yeah. Some of it is, I think, it goes kind of to the achievement gap question as well. If you really want to attack the achievement gap, you have to do it at an earlier age. You've got to get students into reading, writing. It was a great thing within my household because I have a 10-year-old nephew, and then I have a 7-year-old son, and then I have another 6-year-old nephew, and I have a 5-year-old daughter, and they hang out all the time. You see one of them, they're just together all the time. And what does that allow us to be able to do? My 10th grader helps my 7th grader. Or excuse me, my 10-year-old helps my 7-year-old. And my 7-year-old helps my 6-year-old and my 5-year-old. And they just learn from each other. And then you have to start out by teaching that 10-year-old at the beginning, at an early age, here are the expectations for you. And then he or she will pass that along because it's culture. It's culture. And we have families that are still going through that learning process. It's a journey. And so this is where our school system only has students for so many hours of the day. This is where other places, agencies, organizations all have to come together within our community to be able to develop the child and develop the family.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Estefania Holler. I am part of the County Council PTA. I'm vice president. When I saw your resume, I was very impressed as well with all of the work you've been doing and then putting a face to it too, because I've seen you around a lot. So I thank you for that, for being public and being present. That's very important as a parent and student. So because of that, my questions got really hard to ask because you're very knowledgeable of the Board of Education. So my real question is very direct, and is why are you reaching out now to do this short term, and what do you hope to gain and the board, help the board in that short term that you're back on?
Absolutely. Thank you for asking the question. It's really about service. When I started in 2008, there's the old saying, if you don't succeed, try again. I didn't succeed the first time in 2008. I actually wanted to stay on the board in 2016 or 15, but you serve at the pleasure of the governor. And so when I had served, it's a 5-year term. It was a 5-year term. I went to year 6 because of the whole election ordeal and lame duck of the former governor. And I continued to want to serve. Nothing has changed between then and now. I just changed what the new governor didn't want me to serve, and so I served in a different capacity. I now give a lot of my time to South County Youth Association, and we go all over the county playing county soccer in the spring. And our assistant coach associated with that. And, I knew exactly what I wanted to do when I left the Board of Education, and I did it. And I'm going to continue to do it, and I'm going to figure out how to factor in the associated time to make everything come together to be able to support what needs to be supported, to include 2 kids that are now 2 years older than they were 2 years ago. But it's just a passion. It's a willingness to give. It's another way to reach out. It's another way to give to kids. It's another way you really truly understand and see the work that you have contributed maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago. I go back and I look at my voting record is still there for 2012, 2013, 2014, 2015. That voting record is still there. Well, you see that stuff playing out many years. The strategic plan you will see play out many years from when we enacted it. The next strategic plan that the school system decides to put in place, you will see it play out probably in the next decade. And so it's just the sense of wanting to be able to continue the passion, to continue to contribute to our county, to be able to help with our political leaders to understand the value associated within our county. One of your commissioners put together our whole return on investment for Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and I was a part of that. And now you're seeing that investment and that relationship play out. Wanting to continue to be a part of that, that's the only real reason.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
Hello, my name is Ginger Vance, and I represent the Anne Arundel Anne Arundel Chamber of Commerce, in the community. And I'm going to go a little bit off of business, and because I'm curious, I really love that sentence in your application. Let's face it, he's done a wonderful job at keeping our school system moving in a positive direction without a great deal of unnecessary drama and foolishness. I've had 2 of my 3 children in Anne Arundel County Public Schools, and one of them is still in them. And I am saddened by some of the drama and foolishness that I've witnessed. And sometimes that is behavioral. And we've had questions arise with past candidates, and I'm curious what you think about disciplinary schools.
What do I think about disciplinary
in
schools?
Handling behavior problems?
Well, every opportunity is a learning opportunity for a child. And so our educators never can forget that. We as members of the board can never forget that. We have to, as adults, emulate the behavior that we expect our children to perform as kids, as they grow up. If we want adults to be professional and caring and loving, then we better be that too, growing up. And when they see we're not, if they see we're out cursing everybody else under the sun, or when somebody drives by you and cuts you off and do certain things, I love kids because they're a blank slate. If you find yourself typing down the road, your kids will tell you, okay? And what you have to catch yourself doing is saying, my child's right. And that's sometimes a challenge for us because we're the adult. And so the same happens in our schools today. Our teachers, our principals, our educational leaders, board members, we have to be able to hold ourselves accountable to the standards that we would want of how we would want our children to treat other folks. And so, look, I'm from Tennessee. In Tennessee, my dad was an assistant principal. I've had educators all over my family. My wife's in the school system. Her mother was in the school system. Her aunt was in the school system, all here in Anne Arundel County. I mean, my dad was an assistant principal in Tennessee. They were still paddling kids back in Tennessee during those times. So you talk about a disciplinary school. He ran an interesting school. They've since stopped that. But sometimes that got some kids' attention. Mm-hmm. Today, there are other things that have to be in place in order for our kids to be able to really, truly come around and understand the importance of every action that they take.
Thank you, and thank you for all your service.
Thank you, ma'am.
Hi, good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
I'm Allison Pickard, and I'm with the County Council of PTAs. My question is going to be a little different. As your wife is currently serving as deputy superintendent, do you foresee any conflicts of interest arising during board service if you were to be appointed to this role?
We would work through that no differently than we've worked through it and as agreed to with the Secretary of Appointments for the previous governor. For example, on any personnel actions associated with my wife, the board was gracious enough to be able to pull any decisions associated with the superintendent out, and I was able to vote on the other package, and then the board members were able to vote on whether or not they decided on whether or not my wife was going to be promoted. I was a member of the board when my wife started out as, I believe, as an assistant principal. She was appointed as an assistant principal, as a principal of 2 different schools, as well as an acting assistant superintendent, regional assistant superintendent, and then as a regional assistant superintendent. And I believe she was promoted, if I'm not mistaken, I had just left, I believe, before she became deputy superintendent. I don't see that we can't deal with the associated any conflicts of interest as it relates to having board counsel. One of the greatest things about being on the Board of Education is Carney Callahan, Bressler, Bennett, and Scheer. That is the board lawyer associated, and Tyson Bennett is absolutely phenomenal at being able to provide the necessary advice in order to be able to avoid conflicts of interest as it relates to the decisions that my wife may make on behalf of the superintendent, which one of the jobs of the superintendent is appeals and those type of things, being able to appropriately deal with those and avoid conflicts of interest is something that I have thought about and something that could very well be addressed associated with being able to execute my duties relative to being a member of the Board of Education and her duties relative to being one of two deputy superintendents. Not every decision that's been delegated by the superintendent to the deputy superintendents necessarily is all hers relative to making a decision that comes before the board. And so we would deal with that appropriately. We have before, and we will in the future, should you elect me back to the board.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Jackson, I'm Jerry Klassmeyer with the Anne Arundel County Community College Board of Trustees. In your comments, your responses to the questions that were presented, you highlighted school system maintenance backlog as a concern that has to be addressed. I can tell you that in 1968, I was in the county budget office handling the capital budget at the time, and guess what? One of the big problems we faced back in 1968, maintenance backlog. So in the time that's intervened and on your prior service with the board, have you gotten any insights that suggest how we might solve that problem? I only mention it because you mentioned it in here.
Absolutely, absolutely. We can make a conscious decision in Anne Arundel County of how we're going to build new schools to be able to deal with that. You go into a window prior to a decision to rebuild the middle school, elementary school, whatever it may be, of do you take care of any maintenance at that school? If you do, then that can have a negative impact associated with dollars that may go to a new build or a revitalization or something of that nature. And so if we made a conscious decision as a board and as a county and as with advice from the superintendent and of course Alex Shagnovich as the chief operating officer to build schools that may not last 50 years, but they may last a shorter amount of time, then we may be able to handle and build more schools at a little bit cheaper price. An elementary school right now can cost you anywhere from a brand new one, $30 to $37 or so million dollars. We could build elementary schools probably a little cheaper, kind of like Howard County does. But that comes with risk. And that risk is you don't have a school that's going to sit there for 40 or 50 or 60 years. And there's an argument for that you don't know what schools are going to look like in 30 and 40 and 50 and 60 years. It may be significantly different. Pluto used to be a planet when I came through school. People say that it's not. Life changes is the point. And so there are conversations and there's collaboration that needs to happen surrounding that to be able to tackle the backlog issue as it relates to our schools across our county. And we're doing some good things now. We're building the first high school since 1982 here in Anne Arundel County. That's a good amount of work, and we're putting $50 million into it in FY18. That's a beautiful thing. When Ms. Brandenburg and I got here, we weren't even able to have that conversation within the county government because there was too much, there's too much bickering associated around the wrong thing. There was too much foolishness around the wrong thing. And so we have to put all this partisanship aside and realize that this is about children, and we've got to figure out how to tackle that backlog as a community, not just the Board of Education, but as a county community.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening, ma'am.
I'm Dr. Linda Ferrara, and I represent the Association of Educational Leaders, and that's the administration of Anne Arundel County.
Yes, ma'am.
I have a three-part question, and you're sort of segued into that with the previous. How do you define consensus? How do you build it? And give an example of how you were able to do this.
Absolutely, ma'am. Define it is general agreement. Build it is relationships and education and consideration and kindness and caring. An example associated with it, kind of as I mentioned in my opening remarks, we came to a very quick consensus within our board when Kevin Maxwell decided to leave our board very quickly. That consensus was Mamie J. Perkins. That took some time, and not everyone was in 100% agreement, but we had general agreement to be able to move forward as a school system. And that was a temporary interim position, and it gave us the time to be able to build consensus again on what our long-term leader was going to look like, needed to look like, and to be able to start the real journey to putting some of that foolishness behind us as a school board. And so that's one example of consensus if I was going to say within our school system. If I was going to give you a different example within my work, I create consensus every day. I probably manage about $50 to $55 million for the Department of Defense, and I'm the contracting officer representative on about 4 different contracts. I have to build consensus in order to be able to give the warfighter what he or she needs to be able to put ordnance on target, to be able to keep us safe. And I love what I do. I love what I do every day, but that is real consensus, and it doesn't get better than that.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kevin. I'm Penny Cantwell. We've met a couple times before. It's nice to see you again. I'm here representing the Central Maryland Chamber. So my question is, which you alluded to that you had heard before, but please share your vision or description of how you would describe a successful student in Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
Yes, ma'am. A successful student in my mind is someone that has enjoyed the journey and not just the destination. Graduation is a wonderful day, a celebration for a lot of work that's happened, but commencement means beginning. And so we want children to have learned in their primary years and secondary years how to be great citizens, how to be engaged citizens, how to pick up and read a newspaper and read that Kipke gets stitches after dog attack, and understand that law. And I'm glad he's doing okay. But this is the type of stuff that's important for us as citizens to be able to do, to read the paper, to read Bob Mosier's daily notes that he sends out to everybody on his distro about what's going on in the world. One question that you all asked, I believe it was yesterday, what ways do you continue to keep up with the educational things that are going on in the world? He sends stuff from all over the United States relative to things that are going on in Texas and everywhere else. Being able to do math, but being able to read and know that it's important to read, everything you can get your hands on helps you to be a better educated individual about what's going on, not just in the United States, but what's going on in Finland, what's going on in the world, and what the world classifies as some of the best education in the world. Knowing those things, going to the library, picking up trash, being kind to other people, letting people go first, opening the doors for folks, those simple things. We want students that can do that. And in some cases, not everybody's going to be a college student. That's why we need places like Cat North and Cat South and other places to be able to learn how to be a mechanic. I want a good mechanic working on my car. The reason I want a good mechanic working on my car, because I don't have time to take it back a second time. I want it done right. I want it done right the first time. I'll pay the bill associated with it, but I want it done right. And we need good students that can learn that, contribute to our society, and raise good families.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, Kevin. It's Emily. You're making me miss my board days and our board days together. I wanted to say thank you for remembering the economic impact study and all the hard work that went into it. I guess it's probably 3 or 4 years out. It's sort of fun to see it play out and come to fruition and having that conversation change that we worked so hard on. I also want to thank you for your service, both on the board previously and in your community, and again for being out here tonight. We spent so much time together. I don't have any questions, but really thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josie Rea, and I represent the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils. Your resume is quite extensive. But my question is, so you have 6 years of experience on the board, and I'm sure you've tackled and dealt with a lot of continuing and very complicated problems. So one continuous problem in our county is teacher turnover rate, and I was wondering how you would go about trying to fix that if you were to be on the board.
It's a challenge because people think that our teachers get paid or are valued less because our teachers get paid maybe a little bit more than somewhere else, when their whole compensation package is actually extremely strong. Okay, healthcare is something to be valued in Anne Arundel County, and so how do you tackle that? Well, if you look at our budget, I don't remember the exact number, but if you look at our budget, our salaries of basically, that category, there's 13, that category of educators was not funded by the council by, I think it was about $9 million or so. Being able to continue to have that, if you look at, the three comments that, or the three a section, or the section that had, you need to write out less than 15 words what your goals were. One of the things that I said for my goal was to continue to foster the positive relationship with our national, local, and state leaders, because we need to continue to bring them into our school system, allow them to contribute here on a day-to-day basis within our school system, so that they see that value of actually where the money is going. We've got a lot of folks in this county that don't even have kids in the county. We need to figure out how to still pull them into our system and give them an opportunity to give back to our children as well. So it's complicated as far as how do we keep, retain. We've got to give our teachers the best training that we can give them. We've got to continue to fight after increasing their salaries, increasing their benefits. Some of our benefits are actually going away, and somewhat probably rightfully so, and that's part of the agreement that's happening between the board and the county council relative to, we provide more funds, we need to be able to tighten up a little bit on our health care. There's a lot of things that go into that, and a lot of personal and public and private conversations that have to happen around that in order to keep and retain and have the best educators in the classroom for students. So it's complicated. One board member is not going to figure it out. One superintendent probably is not going to figure it out. But there is a huge staff here at Riva Road, and there is a Board of Education that is willing to work, I believe, because I've served on it, to be able to help with that issue of retaining our educators, training them to be the best professionals, and then holding them accountable and trying to pay them as much as possible.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening.
Yes, ma'am. Good evening.
My name is Susanna Kipke. I'm an appointee of the county executive as well. Thank you for coming, and your resume is impressive. I'm curious to know, what are you most proud of from your time previously on the Board of Education, that either that you did or that you accomplished? Or
there are a lot of, I guess, things, but most proud of is probably the selection of our current superintendent, because I think he has the right demeanor for what we just came out of relative to a school system and its leadership. Not that it was bad, it was just different. And I think the current superintendent does a pretty good job with the Board of Education of having the right tone in the right conversation and having the right conversation at the right time. There are a host of things that getting the next high school. I saw the next high school, Crofton High School, a long time before it came to bear, and there were a lot of folks in purple that spent a lot of time in this room. But having a superintendent that allowed that conversation to happen, having an interim superintendent that allowed that conversation to happen. One of the biggest decisions you're going to make as a member of the Board of Education is who's the leader, who's the rallier, who's the smart one that sits at the desk and makes the call, who's the conductor every day. That's important for our children. And so that's probably, the biggest thing. And for this commission, one of the reasons this at-large seat is so important, we haven't operated with a non-member board for several months. The next superintendent contract comes up extremely quickly after you all make your decision in August. And so that's probably been the biggest thing. Although I could list 125 policies, having served on the policy committee, 3 years as a member, 3 years as the chairman, and I could list some of those too that were pretty big. Ma'am.
Well, I was the last question, so thank you very, very much for coming in.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for the opportunity.
Have a good night. Mrs. Frank is not here yet, so we'll go to Mrs. Petz first, and then we'll bring Mrs. Frank up when she arrives. This one and the next one. Is that your phone?
I should have said on elementary school.
I mean, I was waiting. I was right there.
Mrs. Petz, I think I heard you were in here, right, when I was saying the procedure before, so I don't need to repeat it. All right. You can start whenever you're ready.
I got it. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. I thought I was going last after 5-6 people, so I'm brief. So I am Carrie Petz, and I'm here today for what would be my 4th time before a nominating commission committee appointment, applying for a seat on the school board. Over 3 years ago, I started this process of interviews and governor appointments. My name was sent to the governor twice in that time frame. During this time, there were many changes in the process and within our school system. I have held steadfast and maintained my desire to serve as a school board member while continuing to be engaged, partner with many facets of the school system. What my paperwork doesn't convey is that I am an Irish Puerto Rican from Queens who was actually baptized in a Greek Orthodox church. You don't hear that every day. A child of divorce and multiple moves also gave me insight into different cities, people, and schools. I bring all of this up because I know it shaped me into a person who can go just about anywhere, listen, learn, and understand the environment and acclimate quickly. The term of this appointment is shorter than a traditional term, and I'm confident that my 10+ years of direct involvement with CAC, Superintendent's Advisory Council, Leadership Development Institute, budget hearings, workshops, focus groups, and hours of research behind the scenes will serve as a solid base to make my time on the board effective. Thank you again for your time and your service. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for being here. So I'm Mariko Bennett, and I'm representing the NAACP of Anne Arundel County. It's interesting. Your opening statement allowed for, you clearly, some of my questions are not relevant. So I'm actually going to pass this time around and let others ask questions. Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening.
Hi.
I'm Leanne Carmona, and I'm representative from the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. You mentioned in your application the evaluation and implementation process for your son to receive a 504 plan was daunting and confusing, and I just wanted to share that many parents feel the same way. You also talk about meeting the needs of students who require different learning environments. My question for you is, if you were on the board, how would you convince other board members that that is a priority?
I think, again, in conversation, it does come up, I think, when we talk about the different programs that the county offers currently, magnet schools, the Monarch Academy, and those kinds of things. I think it's a current topic. I think it would be something that I would want to have a conversation about. The board obviously meets at different points in times and has those kind of discussions. Because I think the numbers speak for themselves, the number of students that apply to those schools and are on the wait list, so they're eligible to be at those schools. And being special ed, who you're representing, it's not just that. I mean, there are boys, I have boys, and boys learn differently, and there are books and tons of research on no recess, no PE, no competition, all the kinds of things that the way our school system has changed in general, not specifically ours, but how that has altered. You know, boys are being told when they're in first grade, sit down, be quiet, stop moving, don't do this, and how it changes their perception of wanting to be in school because they feel like a failure all day long because they can't, you know, the teacher isn't happy with their behavior, which then impacts their learning. So those alternative spaces where, whether it's a monarch or a cat, and sort of just movement and implementing some of those programs into schools, I think is a valid discussion that our county should be having.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi. I'm Estefania Holler. I'm part of the County Council PTA. And my question is more about the PTA itself. As a long advocate for public education, along with children's health and safety, 120 years of it, where are your advocacy priorities for our school system?
I think one of my biggest things, I actually presented at a PTA training the segment on advocacy. Through my work for our, as Kevin said, Arnold Elementary, you know, that was a specific cause because that's where I lived and my kids were going to school. But the message really is more about sharing with individuals, and PTA is like an amazing avenue for that because theoretically there's one in every school, at least some in the clusters, and it's an easy avenue to disseminate information and contact with the communities and parents and teachers in those areas. But giving them the power to know that they have a voice, and some of it is, it doesn't come naturally to research or look at the website and find out information or even know when to go to a meeting, or maybe it's how to get to the meeting. And giving them that power and information for them to be able to speak for themselves or their child, whether it's a 504 meeting or here at a school board meeting, to me, that's where my advocacy would be, is empowering other people to know that they have options and places to be heard, starting with, you know, a teacher, a principal, and moving up the chain depending on what that issue is.
So more, my question is more like, if you could give an example of how you would make yourself more present to parents and teachers that can feel free to speak to a Board of Education member about these issues.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to, as part of the role, attend those meetings and be more visible in the public. As a representative, I think I do a lot in the community now. It's not under the guise of a board member, but obviously with that title, I would carry that, and I work in the community, I live in the communities, but also have friends that teach and work in different schools in different parts of the county, that this position is at large. So I would assume that it would be at large and making that around the county, not specific to a district.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Hi, Ms. Pets. I'm Ginger Vance, and I was appointed by the Annapolis Chamber of Commerce to be on the commission. And I noticed that one of your goals, if you were to be elected to the board, or appointed to the board, excuse me, was to engage with local business to create partnerships with AACPS. What types of activities and how would you do that?
Again, I am a big proponent of local, and when I say local, we talk about our system in clusters. Again, there's that equity piece. In Arnold, Severna Park, I can go over to the pharmacy and ask for a donation for a walkathon for our school, and the Safeway on the corner, and those businesses will help support our school locally. Again, I don't know that every community and every cluster has people who feel confident bridging those gaps and making those connections. So empowering, teaching, and training people within clusters to make those connections. I think if you also give businesses, I heard people talking last night who own their own businesses and wanting to be involved, I think being specific about the ask of what we're looking for, and at one school it might be one thing, at a different school it might be something else. At those cluster levels, I think we can get a lot done, again, because those business people whether it's Glen Burnie or in Shadyside, those students are the citizens of their area. So if you are helping support them, those people will support your business, as well as, again, sort of being that better citizen because you are part of a community goes a long way if we're working in those clusters that way.
Thank you. I agree that there are people out there that, if trained properly, wouldn't feel as intimidated walking into those local businesses.
Good evening. I'm Allison Pickard with the County Council of PTAs. Ms. Petz, you led the charge of parent advocacy effort that's helped to secure full funding for the replacement of Arnold Elementary. I believe that construction, did it start yet?
I just drove by. We are just chopping down trees and moving things out of the old building. We have not demolished a building yet, but we are right there on the way.
Well, with that experience, if appointed, how do you think you would navigate the capital budget decisions that must be made as AACPS moves through the MGT list of priorities? It's a little different when you're representing the whole county and not just one school.
Yeah, luckily the MGT study was revised, and there's a list that we stick to. Historically has been followed, and the order and placement has been there for years. And again, I think, he's still here, but Kevin was a board member, and at that time, the interim superintendent actually put forth to revitalize our school and not completely remodel and renovate. And we had to convinced Kevin, who then made a motion and, talked to his board members in an open forum. And we got that overturned, and we now are getting that new building. But I think it was because of the things that he heard, and he was presented with factual information. So unless there was something, again, I used to call it the porta potty pissing match, because everyone was in their portables and their kids had to walk in the rain and the snow to get to a bathroom, and every situation sounds horrible, and their conditions are, they're not great for those students in those schools, and we do what we can to support them while we're moving through these processes. But unless there is something egregious or, there's factual information that can change the order of that study, I believe that I would be sticking to the way the study says and what the budget alignment has been passed moving forward.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mrs. Petz, I'm Jerry Klassmeyer with the Anne Arundel Community College Board of Education. Board of Trustees. We've been here too long.
It's not even 11 o'clock. You guys are getting lucky this week.
In your responses to some of the questions that were asked in the application, you identified the maintenance backlog as a problem, and you referred to the exploration of public and private partnerships to help solve these issues, as it did for Broadneck High School. Can you elaborate on that?
Sure. I live in Broadneck cluster, so they needed some additions at the high school, and there's the open-close system for development based on enrollment, and if the schools are open or closed based on their enrollment for construction to proceed. And Broadneck High School they were over capacity, so they knew they were looking for, I think it was 4 additional classrooms is the space that they needed. And Coke Homes agreed to build those 4 classrooms, which in turn did open the cluster to development and allowed them to proceed with land that they owned and were planning on building on, which would have happened within a 6-year moratorium, which again, these are all laws and rules that are in place. So it sped up that process, and some people would say, they kind of bought their way in, but I look at it and say, they built those 4 classrooms. Our students were less confined and had that space. We got to move forward quicker with other projects on the list. And I think there are other areas in the county where we can explore those kinds of opportunities, as well as even at Arnold, there are developments and they needed a water line. And so the school system got some things through the developer because we gave them there are some things that go on as a collaboration that can enhance our opportunities of moving forward of some of those backlog items with partnerships within builders and community businesses.
So it's like extensions of impact fees, in a sense.
Yeah.
I get it. Thank you.
Sure.
Good evening.
Hello, Linda.
I represent the Association of Educational Leaders in Anne Arundel County. I'm Dr. Linda Ferrara, and we've interviewed before. My question is a three-part question. Okay, how do you define consensus? Give an example of how you've done it, and how do you build it?
So defining consensus is general agreement and coming to an understanding as a group. We're obviously speaking specifically about the board, so as a group coming together, whether it's a policy decision, whether we rebuild or revitalize Arnold Elementary, as a group, you have to have, as a member of that group, knowing you're coming across these kinds of decisions, you have to have an open mind and be confident in your knowledge of what you have, but I think there's also a responsibility to know that there are other sides of the story, and sometimes you might learn some information from another board member or someone who speaks at a hearing, and being open to receive that information, and then as a group working together to know that in the end, it's, again, in this scenario, it is about the best for the most children. We kind of, PTA, we use the most children, it's all the kids all the time, and which isn't always the case. So we say, if you are impacting the most children, how are those dollars being spent, or what is that activity doing? So as a consensus, being open and collaborating and working together, and knowing you may or may not always get 100% of what you were looking for or what you believed in coming into that situation, but in the end being confident that as a group you are coming to a positive solution for the good of the county. An example of that is recently at my job, we restructured our entire marketing and sales department, and there were 3 people involved in deciding. We each positioned our plan of what we thought how it should go, and then we worked together and saw the pros and cons of each of our options and came up with actually, a 4th option, which was a melding of all of those to create a new sales team and territory alignment moving forward for strategic year.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Penny Cantwell, and I am here representing the Central Maryland Chamber.
Okay.
So my question would be, actually a request. Would you please share your vision or a description of what a successful student would look like in Anne Arundel County Public Schools?
So again, I think I look back, I have a child with a 504, and I also have, a high achiever child, and academically, their success is going to be looked at very differently, and even their personalities couldn't be more than polar opposite. So it is individual for every child. I would hope that every child in our school system believes that they had an opportunity and were exposed to thousands and thousands of programs and opportunities that are abound from K through 12 in our county, and that they had the opportunity, and whether it's funding and all of those things, to enjoy and embark on those activities, as well as being challenged academically, again, at whatever level that is for them, that they feel their successes. And I think really I look back and kind of think of it as, but not that they feel that, they're going to feel that if we show that to them. And I think that goes back to learning differences and college versus career ready, that all those kids get to feel that they are being successful and that they are valued members of our school community, no matter what group that they are in, and what successes for them will be defined that way.
Thank you.
Sure.
Hi, I'm Emily from the County Executive's appointee. We've been through this process a few times before.
We may have.
And in the interest of time and not offering you the same question as previous go-arounds, I don't have any questions tonight, but really want to say thank you again for coming out and putting your application in and everything that you do for your community and the Anne Arundel County at large. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josie Rhea, and I represent the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils. And so Anne Arundel County Public Schools really focus on and think it's important to have well-rounded kids and make sure that opportunities at each school are shared throughout the county and everything is just, everybody is held to the same standard. And so your statement intrigued me. It says in your application, you said, we might find that there should be a limit to the number of programs and designations a school can participate in and how frequently they can change. So how would that limiting those at each school affect the resources and opportunities available to children at each of their schools?
So that statement kind of, I think it comes to a little bit your question on retention and teacher. I was in Leadership Development Institute, which is for teachers and admin, and I was privileged to be a part of that as a paid person for AACPS. And they are tired, and they do a lot of things. And even Arnold, we're a green school, we're a wellness school, we have AVID, we have, a million programs. And those teachers every year are told, now we're doing AVID. You have to color code your folders and do this and implement it and add it to your curriculum. And for green school, now we have to recycle or whatever the requirements are for each of the programs. I think it can become overwhelming. And if then next year we're not an AVID school, we're this school, those teachers, most of them aren't moving schools every year, and neither are the students. So my statement in that way was really about kind of finding a program and at least letting it live out a lifespan, because right now they can come and go kind of on the basis of a principal. And that to me is a lot of work for those teachers, which again, we want them to be disciplinarians. We want them to be making our kids good citizens and showing them kindness and all of those extra things, as well as teaching them math, the science and everything. And then it's this program and this program and this program on top of it. And sometimes, again, because there is no limit, some school could have 7 different designations or programs that they're following, which I think can become encumbersome at some point instead of actually being an opportunity. And so that's at an elementary school level, and same at a middle, but theoretically a student is moving through a cluster, they would have exposure to different programs in elementary school and then middle school. And if they're in elementary for 6 years, it might be 2 sets of different programs, and then middle school and high school, the opportunities that are available there.
Okay, and then just a follow-up question. So you want to increase magnet program slots, correct?
I think that is definitely something to be looked at, and there are different ways, not necessarily slots specifically in those schools. They could be opportunities, I'm getting my red light, within elementary schools and different places to incorporate those kind of activities.
Okay.
More regionally.
Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Bennett, pass me a note that she does have a question.
Okay. I'm going to ask a question now based on Kenny, your input. I just feel bad. I've asked everyone else a question. I'm like, you got to come up. So, okay. So, do you favor racially balanced schools?
I think that I definitely benefited from being in diverse environments, and we go to Arnold and is not as racially diverse as other schools, and my son is going to Monarch and Glen Burnie, and even on the 3 days that we've been there on the tour, it is very different. And that is actually one of the ideas for increasing magnet spaces and opportunities. Is there are some schools, not in our district, but that use elementary schools as, again, if you want to call it an AVID program or a STEM, I don't know if you have to use that in elementary school, but using those programs to if Arnold is the Avid school, there would be kids from other districts that come to Arnold, like they do in magnet schools, to be a part of Avid, but really it's choice education as well as choice the way they use for Monarch. You have to be from a certain area to go to that school. You could do that with elementary schools to move children around, but also expose them to different opportunities at different elementary schools. And again, it would be their choice to embrace that opportunity.
Would you use redistricting as a process to accomplish this?
That's a tricky one because redistricting in our county is a tough one, even when it's from Broadneck to Cape St. Clair, 3 blocks away. So I think in that way, our county struggles with redistricting territorially everywhere. And I would say both sides want, I think it happened, I'm going to say Germantown, but that's not the right school, but somewhere in Annapolis, they chose, before Monarch came, they chose to stay with their school. And there are reasons for that, because their kids would have been on different buses between the middle school and the elementary school, and working 2 jobs, and all of those kinds of things came into play with that. But the board did decide at that time to keep those kids in their home school because that's what the community wanted. And whether you agree with that because of class size and whatever is a different issue. So I think redistricting for racial diversity would be something that would have to be discussed. And I call it marketing because I'm in marketing, but those communications would have to be very strong and very open and continuous to get approval, I think, from even the community to have buy-in on both sides.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm last. I'm Susanna Kipke. I'm an appointee of the county executive, and I've already done this twice with you,
Yes.
so I won't take up any more time asking you questions. I've heard all of your questions. They've been very thorough, so thank you very much for coming. And
Thank you.
if you want to follow up on your answer to that last question or anything else, you're welcome to submit additional comments.
All right. Thank
to
you.
us. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Is Mrs. Frank here? Not yet.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You'll have 3 minutes for your opening statement. And then each commissioner will ask you 1 or 2 questions. We'll go down the line from my right to left. And each commissioner will have 3 minutes for their question and your answer. When you have 30 seconds left, your light will turn yellow, the light up here, and when your time is up, the light will turn red and you'll hear a ding. Okay. So you can start whenever you're ready.
Okay. First, I would like to thank everyone for being here. I know it's late, and I'm glad I could get here early. I do appreciate all the time everyone's putting into this as a resident and as a parent. My name is Corinne Frank. I want to thank, I am a stay-at-home mother of 2. I have other responsibilities. I'm on the board of directors for my children's soccer league, and I'm the PTA president at Bodkin Elementary School. I have an active license in radiography, and I even have pets and dabble in homesteading. But my driving passion is being a parent. I gave up my life as a working woman with the birth of my son, and now all of my endeavors revolve around making the world a better place for my children. I am not ashamed of what I have sacrificed for my children. I am proud of it. I was certainly the only domestic engineer this year at Career Day. I doubt that I will have the strongest resume in the stack of 23, but I would not be here tonight if I didn't think that I could offer something positive to this board. What I lack in experience, I hope to compensate for with enthusiasm and perspective. I am a thinker, and I am a problem solver. I learn quickly, and I figure things out by doing them. I am young, driven, and I am spurred on by the best of motives. When I see things in this world that need changing, sometimes I realize that I can be the positive force needed, and I can also be a strong example for developing minds. I want this appointment. I want any opportunity to involve the lives of children, and I want to be involved in creating and maintaining a better world for all children. A few months ago, I spoke before this board because my son's school did not have clean water. Think about that. The water at my son's school was brown, noxious, and unpalatable. It had been that way for decades, and I implored this board, please include bottled water in the budget for Bodkin and the 2 other schools of the Chesapeake cluster. But after the issue was resolved, I realized that these children had been overlooked and underrepresented. Moreover, someone allowed this for decades. Dr. Arlotto did not realize that this was an issue, and it was brought to his attention, and he did quickly correct the situation with temporary and long-term solutions. But our PTA had brought this issue before the Water Management Company a year prior and was ignored. Anne Arundel County needs more voices. If the goal of this board is to elevate all students, this board needs more voices. To be reminded that the purpose of policy is to enhance the lives of people that it affects, not just to be written for the sake of having a policy. My son Cullen has had an amazing year, and I am very pleased with Bodkin. It has proven to be an incredible school. But there have certainly been some areas of public education that could use a different perspective. I am dedicated, motivated, and ready to make a difference. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. I'm Mariko Bennett, and I'm representing the NAACP this evening. And so I want to ask you a question. You mentioned in your statement to question 2, utilizing the SROs whenever possible and parent volunteering, fill in the gaps. I love parent volunteers. I'm a super parent volunteer. But in utilizing the SRO, I want to ask you a question in regards to that. So suspension in the school and the school to prison pipeline. Do you know what I mean when I speak of that? Okay, excellent. So studies show that African American boys and girls are suspended at higher rates than that of their white counterparts. In addition to the suspension, they're also charged with criminal charges and go before the judge. And this is actually a very personal matter to me. And that's where our SROs come into play. So what would you do to combat the school to prison pipeline? And, you know, when you mention utilizing the SRO more, how do we ensure that our children, and when I say our, I'm speaking of African American children specifically, are not being overcharged and overcriminalized?
Well, I think for one, when you have an SRO in the school, it would be nice if we could get some really, really quality people to come into the school. The SROs, a lot of times will be a really good role model. And I think that good role models, especially in broken home situations, and a lot of children that come from poverty are in a broken home situation, I think the SROs offering that positive role model will help that, and hopefully it will show them that not all of the police are there to get them, that a lot of times they're there to help them. And I think that building that trust will really help some of these students who have been left behind.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Leanne Carmona, and I represent the Special Education Citizens Advisory Committee. What are your thoughts about narrowing the achievement gap, in particular for students with special needs?
Okay, so narrowing the achievement gap. That is one of those questions that's sort of ongoing. That is one of those problems that every board seems to have, that every community seems to have, every school district seems to have. So you don't have one solution, but you do work together and you do build solutions. And some of those solutions to closing that achievement gap are things like diversifying the schools when you can. And you do that in ways like when you have the charter schools, you have certain programs, you have the STEM programs, you have the visual arts programs. All of those get students who may not find something that they love in math and English, and they go on and they find something they love in performing arts. I was a drama geek when I was in high school, and the Baltimore Shakespeare Festival came into our school, and that really ignited something for me. I loved that drama class, and that really kind of kept me going with the rest of my studies as well. Some of the other things that would help with the achievement gap. Let me see.
Can you speak specifically to students who receive special education services?
To students who have special education. Okay. The achievement gap there. Okay. Some of the ideas I had for that. So one of the things that we're doing at Bodkin is we're adding a sensory room. I think those are great ideas. We're funding, we're getting sensory items, more hands-on type issues, more hands-on rocking chairs and things that they can, well, I think they're called wobble chairs. And I think that's a great idea. I think that's really going to help a lot of people with sensory needs, and I really, really support that. Our PTA is really involved in getting that done. I don't think that that's funded through the school, but I would really like to look into something, where we do help fund some of the poorer schools that may not be able to afford a sensory room. But I love that idea. I'm really excited about that. It hasn't gone in yet. They're building it this summer, and I can't wait. I'm really excited.
That is exciting. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Estefania Holler, and I'm with the County Council PTA. My question is more geared towards, what aspects of the school system are you familiar with, and which are not, that you're not familiar with it? How would you be able to get knowledge of those issues?
The acronyms are killing me. I can't keep up with all of them. The visual performing art, the visual and performing arts, I have that in my notes. I couldn't remember the acronym for it when I just tried to speak. I know that it's the program, I know what it does. I know it's in Annapolis. But I'm having a really hard time remembering all of the ins and outs of the language. I just started studying for this recently. I kind of came in last minute, and that is really something that I'm having a hard time with. Some of the other things that I don't feel that I don't know all of the older programs. I know about STEM, I know about Cat North, I know about Cat South, but I haven't been there. I haven't seen how it works. I get the general idea, but I think that I would really like to get a more hands-on approach to that.
And more of a question of what is your advocacy, what do you want to achieve in the short period of time that you will be on the board if you are elected?
I really want to reduce the bullying in school. I sat at a table with some parents recently, and some of them are pulling their kids out of elementary, or pulling their kids out of school when they get to middle school. That's a huge problem. A lot of them are working mothers, and they want to pull their kids out of elementary school before they get to middle school, but they can't do it. They're just not able time-wise. To have a parent that is so desperate to avoid their kid being bullied that they don't want to enter school is a real problem. I'm really, really concerned about that. I saw a child get off the bus at my son's bus just crying her eyes out. She's the sweetest kid. And she just gets picked on constantly. And it really, my heart really goes out to her. And it really goes out to the other children. I was bullied in high school. I was bullied in a lot of schools. And that is so near and dear to my heart. I have a 3-step program that I would really like to implement. It's in my resume. And that is going to be something that I really advocate for.
Oh, thank you very much.
Hi, good evening. My name is Ginger Vance, and I represent the Chamber of Commerce in Anne Arundel County. And I applaud your passion that you bring, especially for children who often do get overlooked and underrepresented. I believe you have some great examples in your resume, and I have no questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Allison Pickard, and I'm also with the County Council of PTA. So first, thank you for taking the role of president at Bodkin. Lovely.
I'm very excited, thank you.
We always need active parents volunteering, and thank you for your application. What are your thoughts on parent community involvement in the decision-making process of our school system, and particularly the Board of Education? And how would you work to increase or encourage other parents and more input if appointed?
Okay, 2-part question. Can you say the first part again? Thank you.
Sure. What are your thoughts on parent and community involvement in the decision-making process of the school system and the Board of Education? And secondly, how would you work to increase or encourage this input if appointed?
So the thoughts on the parent involvement in the decision-making process. I think that a lot of parents like me are really involved in the decision-making process, and those are kind of the only voices that are heard. There's a lot of parents that don't realize that they can come to the Board of Ed. I mean, does that make sense to you? That they just don't get it. They're not aware that that's an avenue of representing their children. I don't know, what the difference is between a parent like myself and a parent that just doesn't hear about it or doesn't know about it. But I think that allowing people, going into the schools, and I really want to do this. I want to go into the schools. I want to have coffee with the principal when they have coffee with the principal. And I want to tell the parents, if you have questions, if you have concerns, this is my name, this is my email, let me know. And if you want to come up here, say what you have to say to the board. I think that would get a lot of people involved in the decision-making process. If they come and if they, represent their schools, if they represent their children to the board, I think that would help a lot. Thank you.
Mrs. Frank, I'm Jerry Klassmeyer. I'm with the Anne Arundel County Community College Board of Trustees. I want to give you a chance to clarify something. In your submission, you identified yourself as a problem solver, but almost in the same paragraph, you indicated that the unpalatable water situation existed for decades.
Yes.
And I'm just trying to give you a chance to explain, if you're a problem solver, you wouldn't tolerate decades of unsatisfactory water.
You're absolutely right. This is my son's first year.
Okay, so you've just become aware.
I just became aware of it
of the
in
problem,
March,
and when you did,
we had that solved in 2 weeks, buddy.
Gotcha. That's all I wanted to find out. Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm Dr. Linda Ferrara, and I represent the Association of Educational Leaders, the administration of Anne Arundel County. My question is a 3-part question.
I don't like to forget things. Go ahead.
It's fine. Define consensus. How do you build consensus? And give a specific example of how you have built consensus.
Okay, so consensus is usually defined as a general agreement or a meeting of the minds. That's the definition. How you build consensus, there's a couple ways to build consensus. Firstly, you listen, and secondly, you try to find everybody's motivations and everybody's passions and try to outline those, and you try to figure out what you want to accomplish. After that, a lot of times what you'll have to do is show some compassion and take some leadership. A lot of times you have a room full of people and everybody has a passion, everybody has a voice. Somebody's got to step up and say, okay guys, we got to get this done. It's got to happen. Not everybody's going to be happy, but as long as everybody comes to one conclusion, you've made something happen. One example of this, well, I have a couple examples. First of all, I come from very large families. I have an Italian family and I have an Irish family. They're very, very large. So anytime we have Thanksgiving dinner, it's got to be a consensus because anytime we do anything, it's 1,000 people with lots of holiday schedules and we all have to submit our ideas and when do you want to do it? I don't know, when do you want to do it? Well, we got the kids and well, we're not going to be here. And eventually somebody just has to step up and say, okay, well, you might be late, but we got to do it at 2 o'clock because we got to get out of here. So that's one way to build an example of building consensus. Another way, another example of building consensus is one of the boards that I serve on. I serve on my son's soccer board. We disagree a lot more than the PTA. Unfortunately, we have a lot more members that show, and we had some uniform issues, and a lot of the parents didn't agree with the colors of the uniforms. We had some reasoning. The president explained, you know, what some of our reasoning was. They're just not as snazzy as other people, but, you know, eventually we just had to say, this is what we're going to have to do. At least they're different, and in the end, we got it done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Penny Cantwell, and I'm representing the Central Maryland Chamber of Commerce. My request would be to ask you to share with us what your vision or what your description would be for a successful student in Anne Arundel County Public Schools.
Okay, so when you define success, if you define success for a businessman, you would define success by his achievements. When you define success for a student, I think that that's completely different. In my son's school, during the morning announcements, they have the Bodkin Pledge. And the Bodkin Pledge is, I am respectful, I am responsible, and I am ready to learn. And I feel that if you have a student that is respectful, responsible, and ready to learn, that is a successful student. If you have a special needs student, I know she's the special needs lady over there. Sometimes a successful student in special needs would not be an A on a test. Sometimes it's, I buttoned my shirt today. I worked all year and I walked across the graduation stage. Success in a student is not necessarily achievement on an academic level. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Emily Brandenburg. I'm one of the county executive's appointees. Thank you so much for coming out tonight and putting your application in. My question is, can you briefly describe your vision or your understanding of the role and responsibility of a board member, and then the relationship between a board member and the superintendent?
Sure.
Thank
you. You wanted my vision, or
yes, sort of how you what
in
you
the
think.
handbook.
Yes. So it gets to that.
I'll take some of the top items there. Adopting and interpreting policies, I think, is really important for a board member. Establishing the budget is obviously very important, and the establishing the school boundaries. I think that the superintendent is sort of the day-to-day operations guy, and I think that he oversees a lot of things, and then the board comes back and fine-tunes that. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Josie Raya, and I represent the Chesapeake Regional Association of Student Councils. And so your application stresses a lot of mental health for students and reducing bullying. And one way, especially at the high school level, students like to relieve their feelings is using their guidance counselors, their school counselors, their school psychiatrists. But I know, especially at the high school level, most of those people are overwhelmed with over 300 kids, 200 kids. They can't make that relationship sometimes to actually help that student. So how would you go about being your board member, and with your platform of reducing bullying, how would you go about relieving that system?
I think the first thing that we could do is that we could try to improve the entire mental vibe that you get in the school. So you got to uplift the school a little bit first. You've got to try to make it something that people want to go to school. You got to reduce the bullying first. So I think that if you reduce the bullying and you decrease the amount of mental health issues that there are, I think that would help to start off with. I'm a pretty frugal person, and I hate to just keep throwing money at things. But I think this is one of the few situations where I would say we've got to get some more people in there. I think that school psychologists are overworked, underpaid. Well, maybe not overpaid, underpaid, but they're overworked. And I think that they have a really tough job, and I think that we do need to support them a little more. I know, like I said in my resume, the entire county has just sort of exploded with mental health and drug overdose, and I'm not really sure that it can be resolved, but I think that we can at least try to tackle it a little bit, and I think that getting some more people in there is a start. I know that that's not the greatest answer. I also think, I know, it's a start. I also think that, small group sessions are a good idea. That way you don't need to have one psychologist with one child. You have one psychologist with many children. Small group sessions are usually pretty effective. It also allows children to, the bully hears the side of the victim. And I think that helps, especially in the cases of bullying.
And you talk about zero tolerance policy with bullying, but
I didn't use the word zero tolerance.
Okay, or not zero tolerance, but with bullying, do you have any programs of idea to actually help the bully itself too?
To help the bully. Yes, I think that using SROs will help with that as well, because I think that if you have a good role model, like I said over here to Ms. Bennett, if you have a good role model, I think that might help the bully. I think that, sorry, I'm out of time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I failed to mention this in the beginning, but if you have follow-up, additional comments or any follow-up commentary, you can feel free to send that to the same place where you sent your application.
Thank you.
And we'll all receive it, and it'll be added to your application online. So, I am Susanna Kipke. I am an appointee of the county executive, and I have a question. I think most applicants have been asked this, but I didn't hear it asked tonight, so I'll ask it. The time commitment of being on the school board is pretty significant. I know you have young children. Do you feel like you can take on the time commitment that
Absolutely.
would be required?
I would not be here if I didn't think that. My husband and I have spoken, and I have, certain times where I would have to have a babysitter or I would have to have somebody watch my child. My daughter is going to be entering into preschool this year, so I will have a little extra time there. And I'm a night owl, so a lot of my reading and, the kids are in bed, and it's a little more stressful to not read, maybe what I want to read, but certainly I do have that ability. I'm up a lot anyway, and I get a lot of work done. I've done a lot of research in the last couple days to try to play catch up with some of these people who have children who have been in the school systems for a really long time, and I think that I've gotten quite a lot done, and I feel pretty confident. Thank you.
That was the last question, so.
Great, thank you guys.
You're done. Thank you very, very much for coming in, and as I said, if you have additional comments, you can feel free to send them in.
Thank you. Oh. My mom's here. She does not like to speak in front of people.
I would like to make a motion
Yes.
to adjourn tonight's meeting.
Good.
I second that
All right.
motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All
Any
right.
opposed? Okay.